Pittsburgh, February, 5:47 in the morning. Cornelius Delaney, everybody called him Coop, lowered himself into the rusted iron chair on his back. Stooped the way a man lowers himself into cold water. Slow, careful, like he wasn't sure his body would hold. 10 hours on the iron floor will do that to a man. He didn't look at the birds. He never looked at the birds. He just sat there with his thermos and his aching left shoulder and the particular silence of a house that used to have someone in it. The yard was full of them, though. Chickadees in the oak, a cardinal on the fence wire, and the great tit, that small, round, yellow-chested bird, sitting on the old wooden post at the corner of the yard, the same post, the same bird, every single morning. Coop reached down and set his thermos on the boards. The cardinal shifted. The chickadees fluttered. But the great tit didn't move. Then, a dog, some stray from the alley, came tearing under the gap in the fence, barking at nothing, scattering everything. Every bird in that yard was gone in under a second. Black wings, gray wings, a flash of red vanished into the upper branches like smoke. Every bird. Except one. The great tit sat on that fence post and did not move a single feather. It turned its small dark eye toward Coop and made a sound he'd heard 1,000 mornings but never once truly listened to. Soft, low, 3 notes, rolling into each other like something being quietly confirmed. Coop looked at that bird. The bird looked at Coop. And the narrator said, very quietly, that bird didn't stay because it wasn't afraid. It stayed because it wasn't afraid of him. And it knew the difference, because it knew him, specifically, individually, by name, in a language that has existed for 50 million years. A language you have been hearing your entire life, and never once understood. Today that changes. Coop had worked the night shift at Carey Furnace for 31 years. He knew the weight of iron, the way other men knew the weight of silence. He'd come home at 5:30, pour the coffee Odette used to make, except now he made it himself, too strong, always too strong, and sit on the back stoop until the neighborhood started breathing again. That was the word he used, even just in his head, breathing. The moment the milk truck turned onto Bingham Street, the moment old Mrs. Calloway's kitchen light clicked on across the alley, the moment the birds came back. He'd started leaving seeds out 2 winters ago, right after Odette, not for any particular reason. Just something to do with his hands on the dark mornings when doing nothing felt dangerous. The note from Renard Duplessis arrived on a Wednesday. Typed. 3 paragraphs. The seeds were drawing rats. It was a health matter. The block association had a process. Coop had 3 weeks to remove the feeders, or Renard would make it official. Coop read it twice, folded it, and put it in his coat pocket. He went out to the stoop. The cardinal flew. The sparrows scattered. The great tit on the fence post stayed. It always stayed. Here is what nobody tells you about the birds in your yard. They are not watching a human. They are watching you. Not the general shape of a person. Not a moving silhouette of approximately your height. You specifically. The deep-set eyes. The particular jut of the jaw. The furrow that cuts between your brows when you haven't slept. Researchers have proven it, repeatedly, with crows and blue jays and chickadees and the small, watchful great tit. Wild birds possess a facial recognition system of such extraordinary precision that it rivals the most advanced biometric security software ever, built by human hands. They had been memorizing Coop for years, not just his face. The rhythmic drag of his left boot, a 1931 foundry accident that never healed right. The specific metallic pop of his thermos lid at 5:48 a.m. The exact silhouette his shoulders made against the pink-gray Pittsburgh sky when he sat down, rounded, exhausted, the way only a man who has carried heavy things for a very long time sits down. To the flock in that yard, Coop was not a person. He was a permanent file, cross-referenced, verified, known. It was Renard's idea. He said it with the confidence of a man who has never been wrong about anything small. I'll do it myself. Same seeds, same time, same bucket. If they come to me, your whole argument falls apart. Coop didn't argue. He just stepped back inside and watched through the kitchen window, hands wrapped around his coffee. Renard came through the gate at 5:50 a.m. wearing his good coat, carrying Coop's green seed bucket, the dented one with the rust stripe down the side, and walked to the feeder with the brisk efficiency of a man, proving a point. The yard went silent, then it exploded. Hard, clipped alarm calls tore across the oak tree like something being torn. Every bird, the chickadees, the sparrows, the cardinal, the mourning doves tucked under the juniper, gone. Up and away, into the high branches, invisible. In under 3 seconds, the yard was empty. The green bucket meant nothing. The coat meant nothing. Renard stood in the middle of the yard, completely alone, holding seeds no bird would touch. He didn't move for a long moment. Then he looked toward the kitchen window. Coop didn't step back. Renard's face, just briefly, was a man who had expected a door and found a foul wall. The flock was never unguarded. Not for a single minute. While the sparrows worked the ground and the chickadees stripped the feeder, and the mourning doves sat heavy and still under the juniper, there was always one bird up high, motionless, watching, not eating, not calling, not doing anything except scanning. The sentinel. Every flock has one, rotating through the duty the way soldiers rotate a post. It was almost always the great tit. Coop had seen what happened when that bird hit the alarm. A Cooper's hawk drifting silent over the roofline. One sharp, clipped call and the yard emptied before the shadow even reached the fence. Renard's gray cat slinking under the gate. Same result. Instantaneous. Total. But when Coop's screen door opened, that specific squeak of the hinge, that particular weight on the boards, the sentinel did something different. No alarm, no scatter. Instead, a sound, soft, rhythmic. 3 notes rolling into each other, low and unhurried, like something being quietly confirmed. Coop had heard it every morning for 11 years. He had always assumed it was nothing, just birds being birds. Background noise between him and the silence. It was not nothing. That specific sequence of notes, his particular combination, was his name. His acoustic identity, carried on the cold Pittsburgh air across every branch and bush in that yard, the all clear. But also something more, an announcement, a title. He's here, the trusted one. Stand down. There is a difference if you know how to listen. The alarm call is sharp, clipped. A hard consonant of sound, urgent, binary, designed to travel fast and mean one thing only. Danger, go. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. What the great tit called when Coop appeared was nothing like that. 3 notes, low and rolling, the second folding into the third, like a question that already knows its answer. The cardinal's contribution was a metallic double chip, bright, precise, almost like a coin tapped twice on a countertop. And the chickadee shifted its Phoebe call by just a fraction of a tone. A softening, the way a person's voice changes when they say a name they trust. To Coop's ears, for 11 years, it had been morning. Just morning sounds. The audio wallpaper of 6 a.m. To the flock, it was a barcode. Safety, calories, peace, he's here. He found this out on a Thursday, reading a dog-eared ornithology paper a librarian had pulled for him without asking why. He sat in his kitchen afterward, in the dark, coat still on, and he cried. Not loud, just the quiet kind. The kind that has been waiting a long time for a reason small enough to fit through. He didn't know exactly why. He thought it might be because something had been saying his name every morning for 11 years, and he hadn't known to answer. He'd made up his mind the night before. The hook was in his hand before he'd even finished his coffee. The old iron hook he used to hang and unhang the feeder, worn smooth on one side from years of the same grip. He'd take it down before Renard could make it official. Before it became a thing with paperwork and neighbors and sides. It wasn't worth it. Nothing was worth it anymore in the way things used to be worth it. He pushed open the screen door. The great tit was already on the fence post, but this morning there was something beside her, smaller, rounder, the feathers still carrying that new, unfinished look, like something not yet decided. A fledgling. Her fledgling. It sat on the post with its wings held slightly out from its body, trembling. The way a child trembles when the world has suddenly revealed how large it actually is. It saw Coop, 6 feet of tired ironworker, hook in hand, moving toward the feeder. The baby's whole body went rigid. The mother did not move. She sat perfectly still on that post, looked directly at Coop with one dark eye, and called the 3-note gargle, soft, unhurried. His name, spoken the way you speak a name you have said 10,000 times and still mean. The fledgling's wings unknotted, it stayed. Coop stood at the feeder a long moment, hook in hand. Then he lowered his arm. He walked to the rusted chair and sat down. He did not get up for 40 minutes. The birds fed around him like he was part of the yard. Like he had always been part of the yard. The hook stayed in his hand the whole time. He just forgot he was holding it. He went back to the library. He needed to understand the scale of it, how far back it went, how deep. The librarian, Miss Verlaine, didn't ask questions. She just brought him what he needed, and left him alone at the table by the window, the way good librarians do. What he learned sat heavy and quiet in his chest all the way home. The fledglings from 3 years ago were adults now, and they were bringing their own fledglings to the fence post. To his fence post. To learn his face, his walk, his name, the specific 3-note gargle that meant safe. His biometric signature passed down not through any technology built by human hands, but through the living memory of creatures whose entire world was his backyard. He had never known he was being remembered. He had simply filled the feeder, sat still, not scared them, that was all. And it had become a story inside their biology, a true thing, carried forward, taught to children he would never individually meet. He thought of Odette then. Couldn't help it. The things you do when you think nobody's watching. She used to say it about small kindnesses, about the ones that cost you nothing and mean everything. Those are the things that last. He hadn't known she was talking about this too. It wasn't just the great tit family. That was the part that undid him completely. The downy woodpecker that clung to the far side of the oak. The one Coop had always assumed was indifferent, private, interested only in the bark, had been listening. Every morning that the sentinel called his name and the flock stayed calm, the woodpecker was cross-referencing, filing. Matching Coop's specific silhouette, his particular sound signature, against the behavior of birds it trusted more than it trusted its own first instinct. The mourning doves under the juniper, the song sparrows working the shadow edge of the alley fence, even the nervous, half-wild birds that Coop had never been able to get within 10 feet of. They had all been part of the same quiet intelligence network, listening to the trusted ones, watching the sentinel, building their own private file on the man in the rusted chair. His name had been traded like currency across every branch and shadow in that yard. Across species that didn't share a language, only a willingness to trust what the careful birds trusted. He had become certified, vouched for, known, by creatures he'd barely registered, in the dark margins of a yard he thought he owned. He sat with that for a long time. The idea that you could matter to a world you weren't even fully paying attention to. He didn't bring the papers, didn't rehearse anything. He just knocked on Renard's door on a Tuesday mornings and said, "Come sit with me at 6, just once." Renard came, coat buttoned to the collar, hands in his pockets, the posture of a man who has agreed to something he hasn't agreed to. He sat in the second chair, the one that had been Odette's that nobody had sat in since, and said nothing because Coop said nothing, and there was nothing obvious to push against. The yard filled slowly. That was the thing people never expected, how unhurried it was. The song sparrow first, working the fence line. Then the mourning doves, settling under the juniper like they were lowering themselves into familiar water. The chickadees, the cardinal. Each one arriving in its own time, in its own order, the way a neighborhood comes alive at dawn. Then the great tit landed on the fence bedpost. It turned toward Coop and called, soft, low, 3 notes rolling into each other. Renard was quiet for a long moment. "It's calling to you," he said, "not a question." "It's been calling to me every morning for 11 years, Coop said. "I just didn't know how to hear it." Renard never filed the complaint. And every morning after that, through the rest of that winter, through the springs and summers and the slow, gray autumns that followed, through everything that came and everything that didn't. There were 2 rusted chairs on that back stoop. The great tit always called to both of them, eventually.